Today we are continuing our 6-round Chargers mock draft, and we are trying to find value on day 3, and I even ended up with the nephew of all-time Chargers legend, LaDaininan Tomlinson.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer. We've been covering the Chargers together for 7 seasons now together. This is our 5th season as a host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you guys so much for making this your first listen today, and to make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on YouTube and listen wherever you get your podcast from. But today, David, we're continuing rounds 4 through 6 of our Chargers 6-round mock draft after really filling the same needs: edge rusher, wide receiver, and safety. Yesterday, we have a lot of needs to fill, and I started with a 5'7" cornerback, as if Asante Samuel Jr. wasn't enough as a small cornerback in the Chargers secondary. With the last name of Tomlinson, I had to check him out. You ended up going and finding your tight end, and I think after days 1 and 2, a tight end you can get excited about, especially with the athletic profile that he brings to the table. And you also were able to double dip at wide receiver, David, something we've been talking about a lot. Hey, maybe the Chargers should take 2 wide receivers. We'll talk tomorrow about Jalen Guyton. Every day is tomorrow. We're back talking about Jalen Guyton signing and how that kind of affects the draft. But you were able to double dip and bring really 2, I think, different aspects to the table with both the receivers. And you were able to find your own corner that you liked a lot. So we're going to get into that. First, we have to start with pick 4 in the 4th round, pick 125. First, we had yesterday's show, Myles Murphy and Jordan Addison. In the first round, I had Myles Murphy, you had Addison. Second round, I went Mims, you went Sidney Brown. And third round, I went Quan Martin, and you went Zach Harrison. So we filled all the needs there. I ended up going with a corner because it's something I think is a need for the Chargers that we don't maybe talk about enough, just with the uncertainty of Michael Davis in 2024, with J.C. Jackson coming back from that injury. And David, when you see a last name Tomlinson, right, that's going to get me to watch your film, even if you're a borderline undrafted free agent. And I wasn't, upset that I did it, but I had to give him the shot.
Well, and there's been some Tomlinsons in the NFL that have not been related to LaDaininan Tomlinson, but that is not the case with this particular prospect. This is a direct descendant of LaDaininan Tomlinson. So, of course, as a Chargers show, as Chargers analysts, there's no way we could have gone through this draft prep without taking a look at a family member of the Hall of Famer, LaDaininan Tomlinson.
And that's not to say that he didn't get here on his own merit, right? I mean, this is a guy that could go before the 4th round pick for the Chargers. Dane Brugler has him as a 4th or a 5th round pick, mostly because of his size. And let's just get that red flag out of the way right off the bat. 5'7.5", and I'm giving him the half because he needs it. 178 pounds, only 29-inch arms. But he plays so much bigger than that, and he plays such an attractive style, especially after watching Asante Samuel Jr., right, and falling for him once upon a time, and he was our favorite 2nd round pick that year, and it all came to fruition. He has a lot of those same intangibles, right? Has the feistiness, wants to compete in the running game, even though he's a lot smaller. He wants to make plays on the football, even with his short arms, right? 18 passes defense in 2022 alone. And I think one of the other big things as far as the stats I saw that really impressed me about him, besides just being able to watch him and kind of watch how he gets around being 5'7", right? Deep balls against him, targeted 20-plus yards down the field 24 times, only allowed 5 catches at a 31.6 rating according to PFF. And it was just nice to see that back up the few games I did get to watch where he wasn't really allowing a lot of big plays. He was making a difference in run defense, even though at times he can get swallowed up by receivers because he's 5'7". But there's something about that, little spunky player, David, that can kind of work around what he doesn't have size, right, and makes up for it in heart.
Yeah, absolutely. And you need that. I mean, if you're going to be that size, there's a couple of things that you have to have if you want to make it at the NFL level. You got to have that heart. You got to have some raw athleticism, and you have to have some speed. And he definitely brings that to the table. And he doesn't allow his diminutive stature to affect how he plays the game, because he plays a physical brand of football, even at his size. He does not play that size. He is ready to run you over, and he will do it. And so I love that aspect.
It's funny because I think it does like affect him, but it kind of affects him in a positive way where like he is always trying to make up for it. I think the
on his
one
shoulder,
place it hits him in a negative way, David.
Yeah.
14 penalties, right? Like the chip on the shoulder has to be reined in a little bit. Like you need it at that size. You kind of have to be like that. But like that is one part where it's like, I love it, but 14 penalties in one season, even with that crazy, even though your whole career you only landed a passer rating of 54.6, harder to get around with 14 penalties.
You're right. But also we have to consider this. He did win the Jim Thorpe Award for the 2022 season, which for those out there who don't know, that is the award for the best defensive back in college football. So that is a tremendous accomplishment, especially for his size. That's showing everyone that despite how big he was, his play was 10 times that size.
Yeah, and I mean, it would be interesting, if we were using FanDuel to make a bet on like where this dude is going to get drafted. It'd be hard to say where it's going to be just because he has so much talent. But he has those, obvious things against him, right?
Sure.
I think for the Chargers, he feels an immediate need for you at slot corner, right? Even though he played a ton outside at TCU. Long term, outside, I don't know how much it helps you there. Yeah. Sante Sammy Jr. you already have playing out there, so we know the Chargers will make an exception for a tiny corner. This one's even tinier, though. If we were making a FanDuel bet, though, I would bet that this dude finds a way to have some role in the NFL, though. Like he's gonna make it happen at 5'7.5". Like he might be this big, but man, that dude plays such an attractive, fun kind of style of football. Who did you end up going with in the fourth round?
Yeah, so from 5'7" to 6'7", I am going to tight end Zach Kuntz, who happens to be from Old Dominion and also happens to be the highest rated RAS athlete in RAS's entire history of evaluating tight ends. That is a perfect 10.0 RAS score. 6'7", 255 pounds, a 4.55 40 time.
Yeah.
And this guy has 34-inch arms. That's like elite left tackle size arms.
Truly.
That's
longer than Rashawn Slater arms.
Yeah. Which is fantastic. I mean, truly ridiculous. Really enjoy the fact that he's comfortable from multiple different alignments in the slot, in line, out wide. Fairly quick off the line of scrimmage for a guy his size. Like he does create some separation that way. Also, really love the head fake. Like it's nasty. Like he uses that in his routes to create some separation, and it definitely works. Also, this is a player, Daniel, that plays with some emotion, plays with some swagger out there. He's having a good time. He's enjoying the fact that he's playing a kid's game. And although he's not a phenomenal blocker at this point in time in his career, he has all of the makeup and all the tools necessary to be a good blocker. He has that length that I talked about. He has some very good strength, and he has the frame to turn into a very good blocker with some good coaching at the next level.
Yeah, and that's the frame part is important too, because it's like, and you see guys a lot, and you want to just be like, okay, well, this dude could put on 10 pounds, right? Or he could lose 20 pounds, or whatever the case is. And a lot of time, like, there's certain dudes who are like as rocked up as they could possibly be. Like they've completely filled out whatever that frame is, and you can get no bigger than that, right? He's a guy where his whole game is kind of like that, where he's just, you're hoping you're getting a moldable ball of clay where it's like, I can take this athleticism and make it actually look like he's that athletic, right? Because I don't think he lived up to that athleticism on tape, right? I didn't watch him on tape and say, oh my God, that is the most athletic person I've ever seen play that position. I just didn't, right? But we know he has it to some extent. And game speed and combine speed are totally different at times. And it's not like he's slow by any means. He's very, very fast. He is very, very athletic. And I think the nice thing is you've seen moments of being a good run blocker.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
That encourages you. Moments of him actually moving people off the line of scrimmage and not just being a directional blocker. So, like, some guys, all they're ever going to be is, I can get in front of you. I might be able to slightly turn you, whatever. This is a dude that it's like, okay, well, I could see him being able to move people. I could see him being able to be a competent blocker and have the strength to do that, right? And even though he's kind of average in separation right now, even though he's kind of an average route runner right now, those are all things that with that athleticism, I think, especially in the 4th round, those are the traits you're trying to bet on.
Absolutely. I mean, you're looking, obviously, in the middle rounds of the draft, you understand that guys are going to have flaws. I mean, and you're not necessarily looking at that aspect of it. You're looking at what does this guy have right now that I can maximize and I can accentuate and I can really unlock at the NFL level. Do I have the coaches that are going to be able to develop this player into what he possibly can be? And when you have all of that athleticism, your ceiling is so much higher than if you don't.
I agree, and that's what you're trying to bet on. Everyone, you're betting on traits to some extent because nobody's a finished product. Everyone's going to be a work in progress.
Absolutely.
But with what you have in the tight end and where you're deciding to take one, you're not getting one of those blue chip guys in this draft class. You want to get a guy who can potentially turn into that. With Donald Parham on a 2-year contract and no real production to this point in his career that's meaningful, and Gerald Everett heading into the last year of his contract, if you're going to wait, and there's not many people I'd want to wait and end up with other than him. I ended up getting a guy later on. I went a different direction with it. I ended up going, hey, if I'm not going to get an elite pass catcher, I want to get somebody who I think can be meaningful as a run blocker later on in the draft just to try to round out that room. But if you're looking for the guy who might be able to someday turn into that guy, hey, maybe these are the traits you're trying to bet on to see if that can happen, right? I don't blame that at all. But we have more fun to get into. David is going to later on double dip at wide receiver, but I had a running back I am very, very excited about who had 4 separate games in 2022 where he had at least 160 plus yard carry. Think about that for a second. So we're going to get into him and why I make a bet on him. But first, I need to tell you guys about the official betting sponsor of the Locked On Chargers podcast, and that is FanDuel. Grand slams, no hitters, and double plays are back right now, guys, and there's no better place to get in on the MLB action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's right, because right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up, place your first bet, and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. So many great things to bet on FanDuel. Right now, guys, I don't need to tell you. Also, the NBA playoffs are going on, and they have been nuts so far. The NHL playoffs are going on, and it's probably the gnarliest playoffs that there are, and a lot more fun to watch if you're a football fan if you're using FanDuel. So don't miss out on your chance to get that no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Let's get into round 5 for the Chargers, David. We've only had 1 5th-round pick so far last week with our 5-round Chargers mock draft, and we went a different direction with it this week. 2 new 5th-round picks for us. Who did you end up going with in the 5th round, knowing what you have so far? You covered the big 3. You got an edge rusher, you got a wide receiver, you got a tight end, right? You even added a little safety into the mix there. Who'd you end up going with in the 5th round?
Yeah, so going in the 5th round here, I am looking for someone who can add to my wide receiver room that's going to kind of double as a guy who can be your next punt and kick returner. Because I don't feel like that guy is in the building, even with the Chargers bringing back Jalen Guyton. I feel like this is a year where the Chargers very well could and should carry 6 wide receivers. So with that being said, my next pick is Parker Washington out of Penn State. Parker Washington is a smaller receiver. He's 5'9", 204 pounds, only 29-inch arms. So obviously that's going to limit the catch radius. But man, was this guy fun to watch. I mean, you put on the tape, and this is another guy that plays much bigger than what he is. Also, like I said, has that punt and kick return experience. He's slippery, and he's truly, truly tough. He is really, really hard to get on the ground. When he's got the ball in his hands, a lot of people say he's a wide receiver and a running back's body. This guy does not care about taking punishment. He will go over the middle fearlessly. He's really strong, and he's only had 8 drops and 154 catchable targets. which is fantastic. Very sure-handed there. Despite his size, I feel like he is competitive when he has to be asked to go up and get the football. He can do it. I mean, he's a lot smaller, but he doesn't let that stop him. He has a pretty good vertical, and he shows it. Also, he is a creator in space. He's a guy that was featured a lot with those quick passes, with the screen game. He had 15 missed tackles forced last season alone and 6.3 yards per route run, which after the catch, really fun player to watch. Parker Washington, a guy you add to your room as a gadget type of guy, and a guy that's going to bring that special teams ability that you should be looking for at this point in the draft.
Yeah, that is one place, even if he's not a speedster, it would have been interesting. He got injured, so we didn't get to see what that 40 time would be, and that would have been really interesting for Parker Washington. 6.3 yards after the catch per reception, right?
Yes.
So he helps your yak game. That's according to the Beast. Dane Brugler had that in there. This is the thing. So, you ended up going in the first round with Jordan Addison. We're doing these mocks just kind of trying to give an idea of who's going to be around in all of these rounds, right? So, for me, I think with Jordan Addison, I probably go, hey, I try to find speed, right? And try to match him with speed. But, say we mixed our mocks, right? I think this is a dude who would kind of go well along with, Marvin Mims, right? Who doesn't bring a lot after the catch and a little bit more slight. One of the things I like, even though Parker Washington's only 5'9", he weighs 205 pounds. Yeah. So he's substantive. He's thick. He's compact. He has a frame that can – so he's not – Jalen Hyatt's 6'1" and 171 pounds. Right. So this dude has the frame to kind of last and be a little bit more durable. You're not worried about that part of it like you are with a ton of these sub 5'10" wide receivers in this draft that are all tiny and weigh 180 pounds or less.
He's hard to bring down, man. He is not a guy that goes down on initial contact. He fights through the first tackle, even the second tackle. I mean,
he relishes contact is one of the notes I have. Yeah, yes. I have that. And this was another good note from Dane Brugler, right? Kind of a gamer. 2 of his best 3 games were against Ohio State. When the lights were bright, this dude found a way to come through. He's not a burner. I think sometimes as a route runner, he takes some unnecessary steps. I think that's something that can get cleaned up a little bit. But really, really good ball security, especially when making low catches, able to get his hands underneath the ball. Great body control and adjusts very well to the football and really does attack the football when it's in the air like someone who's a lot taller than 5'9", and I really appreciated that about Parker Washington. For me, in the 6th round and the 5th round for this one, I ended up going with DeWayne McBride, running back from the University of Alabama, Birmingham. So he was, I think, the 193rd ranked prospect on the Draft Network. So not a lot of consensus for a guy who did exactly what you want him to do for a guy coming from smaller competition, right? If you're going to be from a smaller school, I want to see you dominating.
Yeah, you better be the shark, right?
Exactly. This is a guy that has a lot of experience in outside zone running schemes, and I like the fit for this guy. Maybe he's not a fit for every team, but with what Kellen Moore is bringing to the table, I'm looking for, even though this guy is not the most explosive, he doesn't have the best top-end speed, he's not a home run hitter, didn't get testing numbers from him because of a hamstring injury. It's a dude who just gets chunk plays, and he doesn't have any of the elite traits probably. We'll see what happens, but 4 separate games with a 60-plus yard carry in 2022 alone. His career, he averaged 7.4 yards per carry. I watched him against Georgia. I thought he held his own when the entire offensive line got swallowed into the belly button of Jordan Davis when those two teams went together in that game. Also, 4.6 yards post-contact, according to Dane Brugler, number 1 in the FBS. That's an insane number. So he runs really hard. When he finds the gap, he finds a way to create chunk yardage, and he breaks a ton of tackles. All things that really, really attract me to someone like this, especially if he was able to realistically fall to the 5th round.
Yeah, I mean, a typical running back build, 5'10", 209. I mean, thereabouts. I mean, that's the kind of size that you're looking at.
Yeah, just about that, yeah.
Yeah, for a running back here, a guy who runs with really good power, which is one of the kind of elements I would say that you don't really have very much of in the Chargers running back room. I mean, that's definitely something.
1,072 yards after contact in 2022. He had a 1,000-yard season just after guys hit him.
Yeah,
Like that.
which really speaks to his excellent contact balance.
Yeah.
And the power that he runs with. He brings that to the table. I think if you're looking for some things to work on, the receiving skills, I think is probably something that you can definitely, get some help. Yeah, he's got a little bit smaller hands.
5 career receptions, David. He does have
Yeah.
smaller hands. He has 5 career receptions. That's nothing.
That's nothing. Yeah,
Literally.
yeah. I mean, obviously, when you start from nothing, you can only go up from there. So the receiving chops obviously is not
But like
something he
Isaiah
brings to the
Spiller can
table,
catch.
but-
Like
Yeah, he
Isaiah
can.
Spiller can catch. Austin Eckler is great.
So can Josh Kelly.
receiving.
Yeah, all your running backs you have right now have pretty good hands. So
Yeah.
if you bring one into the building that is more of just a guy who's going to run you over, that is fine by me. I mean, I've been looking for that type of prototype. There's been a lot of Charger fans that have been looking to add that type of guy to the running back room. So I feel like this is a guy that could fit very well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And this is a project, right? A little bit.
Sure.
It's the 5th round. You're going somewhere later. I didn't go 4th round because that's the last 2, times the Chargers picked. 4th round running backs. We're still waiting to see on Josh Kelly and Isaiah Spiller. Didn't go 6th round where they took Larry Roundtree. Tried to find the sweet spot.
Right in the middle.
Didn't go Bijan early on, right? I wanted to find someone I feel I could have some upside. I don't think he's athletically going to be enough to totally woo with a lot of teams. I think a lot of teams are going to be like, hey, I don't care that you averaged 155.7 yards per game and led the FBS.
I mean, you should.
You're not for me. I don't care that you had 32 touchdowns over the last 2 years. All of those things are probably why he goes before the 5th round. But some places, like I've said, have him ranked way, way lower and don't trust what he did against smaller competition. I'd be willing to take a flyer on it. I liked a lot of what I saw from him. But we have a couple more guys we want to get into, including me finding my tight end, but going in a very different direction. You went with the most athletic tight end ever to come out of college into the draft, and I went with definitely not that, but you were able to find a corner that I think would get a lot of people excited because he absolutely looks the part of a corner you would get excited about. We're going to get into that coming up after this. All right, David, taking our first crack at the 6th round for the Chargers, but this is not all the draft coverage you guys are going to be getting this week. And even though I appreciate you making us your first listen today, the everydayers know there will be more for the rest of the week. Is the only daily Chargers podcast out there, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. So that's why you're going to want to make sure you're here tomorrow, because we're going to be breaking down the Jalen Guyton signing and how that is going to affect the Chargers and what they end up doing in the draft. And really the main point being, it still has to be more than that. Maybe we'll mix in some fan mail questions as well, but later on in the week, we're going to keep tomorrow and the next day because we're going deep into the positions that matter in this draft class. We're breaking down our favorite edge rushers on Friday and our favorite wide receivers on Thursday before we get into our final mock draft on Monday, our ideal 7th-round mock draft that we're going to be spending all weekend doing. But now we're going into our first option at 6th for the Chargers in the 6th round. Haven't talked about 6th-round picks yet, David. Who did you end up finding late?
Yeah, so late in this draft, I was looking for something on the defensive side, and that led me to cornerback Alex Austin out of Oregon State. And just like Daniel said earlier when he was kind of teasing this segment, this is a guy who looks every bit the part of the corner that you're looking for. 6'1", 195 pounds, so good height, good weight there. 31.78-inch arms as well. I think the only aspect that you would, I guess, like to see a little bit more of is the speed. Only a 4.53 on the 40 time there. I think that's maybe a little bit underwhelming, but good height, good weight, good length for that cornerback position. Also, those are all things that the Chargers covet if you look at the type of cornerbacks that they like to bring into the building. A fluid mover. I think he does a really good job of staying in phase with wide receivers. It doesn't seem like he has very much trouble. Also has a sprinter background, which really shows itself whenever, receivers are trying to get deep on him. He has no trouble keeping up with them. So even though there's a 4.53 40 there in that particular test, game speed wise, I feel like he is able to keep up. He is a willing tackler. He's not afraid to mix it up. Also, intangibles wise, very, very high up on that. He actually created his own scholarship fund for students, and it's called Overcoming Adversity, which that is really cool. I mean, just to be able to do something, even you're in that area for a temporary amount of time, to be able to make a permanent impact with something like that is fantastic. Also, 4 INTs. So he does have some ball skills.
Over the last 2 years.
Right, over the last 2 years. So he does have some ability to take the football away.
Yeah, I like that. this is a guy that on paper, you especially with like the mid 4.5s 40, you could get scared away from a little bit for sure. The weird thing about it though is his 10-yard split was actually really, really good. Even though pretty much everywhere else he scored very averagely. I mean, very poor agility grades for him. Not really fast, at least as far as top end speed, and not super quick, I would say. But when you watch him, it was nice to see kind of how he made up for a lot of that. I mean, he does have 21 passes defense over the last 2 years. So he makes plays on the football when he's there. There are times, though, when it does seem like he needs a little bit of a gather step when he's trying to come back to the football when guys get separation against him, right? That is something where I saw it and definitely translated there. Him and Trey Tomlinson, both dudes play a little too much patty cake. Even though both dudes are willing to come up and fill in the run game, both dudes just get caught too much at times with wide receivers who have no business staying out there with them, especially a dude this size. Get that wide receiver off you, get involved in the play, right? I hate when I see dudes doing that. Something that is correctable, though, right? That's not a death sentence by any means. But very physical player for sure. I mean, I think in a lot of ways. And when he was able to stay connected, definitely made plays at the catch point, and definitely like that about him. Another guy, 13 penalties over the last 2 seasons. That is something, David, where both these guys, it's like, okay, you like the physicality, and there's a lot of corners we see like this, but it's something that you're just never going to be able to get away with at the NFL level.
No, you're not. But the later and later you get into these drafts, the more and more you're going to find guys that have
you're looking for correctable stuff
with
6-round picks.
penalties. Right, exactly. So again, you're looking for traits. You're looking for things that you feel like can project, and he has that in spades. He has those projectable measurables that you're looking for. And yeah, penalties, you don't like to see that, but that is correctable. So, I mean, I think when you get him with the NFL coaches, you get, those secondary coaches that the Chargers have, I feel like that's definitely something they can iron out.
I mean, physically, we went totally opposite directions for the corners we took today. That's for sure. 6'1", one side, 5'7.5" on the other side. I get it. I mean, definitely traits you could work with. Honestly, his RAS to me looked a lot like Michael Davis without really the top speed, which is obviously Michael Davis is a 4.3 guy.
Yeah.
This guy's a 4.5 guy, But the thing to me wasn't even about him being fast enough to keep up with the receivers. I thought he just played it really well by just getting in front of receivers. That's the one thing like corners don't do enough is using their body to get in front of the receiver, because guess what? They can't run faster than you if they're behind you.
Right. It's kind of hard to run through you.
Totally. And this dude has a big body. And one thing I saw him do is he would stack the receivers, right? He had the receivers on his back. Maybe that comes back to haunt you a little bit and back shoulder throws and some things guys can do at the next level for sure. But I really was impressed by his ability to get on top of receivers and never let him, because I think if he had to chase, he'd be in trouble a little bit. He never really put himself in that where he had to
make
be
the
desperate.
Receiver make the play, right? I mean, make it as difficult as possible to make the play, and you got to put your body in front of him, do it.
In the few games where, too.
That we're able to watch, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's only so many games we get to watch, but in the few games, that was something I saw that I was like, okay, well, that makes me less worried about just the not elite top end speed.
Right.
I'm going to wrap us up here with a not exciting pick, but I like the way that it filled out my draft. Somebody that we watched and talked very, very slightly about during the tight end show, and I ended up with Payne Durham, the Purdue tight end, 6'5", 253 pounds. You should just write that in the dictionary for tight end. Right, 6'5", 250 pounds. That's the prototype. 33.4-inch arms. Another guy, David, that has the arm length that, I think as Dan Brugler put it, would make some offensive linemen jealous, right? There's definitely some offensive linemen out there that are tackles that are like, if I just had Payne Durham's arms, I could play tackle at the NFL level.
Seriously. This
is what I liked about him. First thing first, out of the later guys, he was the best inline blocker that I found. That's what really, really attracted me. It's a 6th-round pick. He's probably somewhere around 5 or 6. Maybe he doesn't make it this far, but I wanted to be able to talk about him here if the Chargers go a different direction in trying to round out that tight end room later on. I trust Gerald Everett as a receiver somewhat, right? And I already got an explosive receiver in Marvin Mims earlier, so I've addressed some of that explosiveness. What I feel like I'm getting here is a guy that shows a lot of ability as a blocker and has the physicality to kind of hang at the NFL level seemingly right now.
Yeah.
Has enough in the receiving chops for a guy who runs mid 4.8s. I think he's not a super exciting guy in that regard, right?
Right.
But I feel like a guy that blocked well enough to where I could say, hey, it's not me taking Trey McKitty in the 3rd round and hoping he's a great blocking tight end, right? This is me taking Payne Durham in the 6th round, feeling like he does fit kind of what Kellen Moore wants to do as far as being a blocker, but brings enough to the table with a big catch radius, very comfortable hands catcher, some impressive catches in traffic because he doesn't get a ton of separation, that I'm worth taking a flyer on him late.
Well, I mean, when I watch Payne Durham, I like the quick release. Yeah, he's not the fastest guy in the world, but he does get off the line of scrimmage pretty quickly, and that does help him out a little bit. I feel like he's got to work on the accuracy when he's traveling to block, defenders in space, especially. And he's much better when he gets to deliver the blow versus him having to absorb the blow. He definitely gives some ground a little bit when he's having to do that, but when he gets to be the aggressor, he's definitely at his best, and he is very, very impactful in that situation. Also, he keeps working for his quarterback. I remember a play where, his quarterback was, rushed out of the pocket. He stayed with it, stayed available, and was able to make a play and extend a drive for his quarterback. Also, pretty strong hands, made a pretty nice over-the-shoulder catch for a touchdown against Wisconsin that I enjoyed as well. So he definitely brings some things that you want to the table, not an athletic freak here, but that's not exactly what you're looking to add to this tight end room with the way it's been set up. You're looking for a guy that's going to improve that blocking ability. He's going to do that day one, and he does have some receiving chops that can get better at the NFL level. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think he's a much more natural receiver than someone like Darnell Washington. Doesn't have the brute strength and force, but isn't as far away from being kind of that dude as an inline blocker, that you can have out there. And, it is polished enough. I think when we first talked about him, I told you that he kind of runs like Gronk did, but after Gronk's 17 surgeries, he's definitely lumbering for sure. He's a load. He's a hard boy to bring down for sure. I don't think that doesn't translate always well to the NFL.
It's like a steam engine, man. Pick up speed and hard to stop, hard to bring down.
Yeah, so I mean, he definitely showed enough where I'd be willing to try to round out that tight end room and give me someone that I'm not necessarily ever looking for him to be tight end 1, right? But if I can turn him into a tight end 2, a good, blocker and a passable receiver.
Yeah.
That's a great 6th round pick, man.
Absolutely.
So that's the kind of thing.
The guy that's probably going to factor in on special teams as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. That's a great call on that as well. But I like the way these turned out. You ended up getting that double dip on receiver. We got to talk about a couple of safeties that we like. Both of us were able to address, edge and wide receiver on days 1 and 2, which I think you want to hit at least 2 of those 3 out of the trifecta of tight end, edge rusher, right? And tight end, edge rusher, and wide receiver. So I really like the way these kind of played out. I like some of the value that we got later on in days, in rounds 4, 5, and 6 here. It's very exciting. I'm excited to do kind of our ideal one next week now that we have this all online. Thank you to everyone who checked us out and made us your first listen today and stuck with the second half of the mock draft. And this is just the beginning of the week because the everydayers know we are here every day and we will be back with you guys tomorrow. I want to talk about this Jalen Guyton thing, a couple of other things, maybe some stuff that Brandon Staley had to say as well in his first public appearance in a while. But Thursday, the wide receiver show, talking about the wide receivers we like the most and getting into some guys we haven't got to talk about yet so far and the guys we think are the best fits for the Chargers on days 1, 2, and 3 before the edge rusher show on Friday. And that's all going to culminate in the 7-round Chargers mock draft starting next week because next week is draft week and it's coming close. And you guys are going to want to make sure you're here for it and to make sure you don't miss it. Make sure you're following or subscribing for free on YouTube and listening wherever you get your podcast from. You can also find the show every day on our social media. You can find me on Twitter at DanTalkSports and David Drogemeyer on Twitter at DroTalkSD, as well as the show's page at Locked On LAC. You guys can also find us on Instagram at Locked On Chargers and on our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. We might have to throw some things in tomorrow from some fan mail stuff. Maybe we get some fan mail questions in tomorrow. You can call into the voicemail line, as always, at 323-524-7924. But hey, we're going to keep grinding out this film. Long part of the year for us for sure, but we like doing it, and it's always fun when we can come together and have a good energy, fun show like the one we had tonight. So thank you guys. We'll be back with you guys tomorrow. Until then, take it easy and go Bolts.